A new year, but it's the same look from the socialists in the Democrat Party. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Quick housekeeping: if you want to subscribe to Bold and Blunt, please go to WashingtonTimes.com, find my hyperlinked name anywhere on the site, click on it, scroll to the bottom, and there are some easy directions on how to sign up for my twice weekly podcast, Bold and Blunt. And you can also get delivered right to your email box my 3 times a week newsletter with all my commentaries that I post at the Washington Times all day long, all week long, along with my twice weekly podcasts. The newsletters come out 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right before lunch, in time for lunch. So please, if you'd like to support Bold and Blunt, you can do so by signing up for the newsletter, and I am most appreciative of those who do so. You can also get Bold and Blunt at the #1 platform for Christian conservative podcasts in America. I haven't done a poll or survey on that. That's just my personal opinion, but it's called Edify. Edify.app/podcast. Go there. You can subscribe to Bold and Blunt there, along with all the other great faith-based podcasts. I suggest you do it because Democrats are taking us down a deep, dark, bleak path, and you need all the godly intervention and inspiration that you can find. So sign up for Bold and Blunt there. Also, you can get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are offered. Now, for the first podcast, Bold and Blunt podcast of the new year. And so it's 2022, and Virginia is finally climbing out of the debacle of Snowzilla that was fueled by the inactivity of the Democrats in Richmond. And I know this firsthand. Power was out, electricity was out, heat was out, internet cable, of course, was out. The roads were a mess. I-95 was shut down in both directions. Route 1, north and south, was a madhouse. Route 1, for those who aren't aware of the geography of Northern Virginia, that is the alternative north-south route to I-95. It took 10 hours to make 20-minute trips. Why? Because cars were busily driving on the wrong side of the road to dodge the other vehicles that had broken down or had been engaged in 10-car pileups, 20-car pileups, 15-car pileups. And what was Governor Ralph Northam, Democrat, in Virginia doing? Packing, I guess, because he's due to leave office, but in the meanwhile, thousands and thousands of people were suffering. Where was the declaration of the state of emergency? This is the governor who declared a state of emergency ahead of a pro-Second Amendment rally outside the state capitol in Richmond a year or so ago. So he knows how to use that power. But for the worst snowstorm to hit this area in, I don't know, decades, 100 years, ever, he's happily tweeting out a day later that, hey, we're on top of it, don't worry about it. Anyhow, that's just an example of Democrat leadership. And we see that daily from our Democrats on Capitol Hill. Today is January 6th, an important anniversary for the left, because it's their means of making sure that nobody in America forgets that Donald Trump was to blame for what the left is billing as the coordinated, strategized attack on Capitol Hill. Let me read you this from CNN. As the first anniversary of the attack on the U.S. Capitol approaches, the House committee investigating January 6 faces its biggest challenge yet, proving allegations that there was a coordinated effort behind the insurrection and convincing the American people that former President Donald Trump was complicit. Okay, so that was CNN's lead on this day. You can see where they're going with this. Everything has to be tied back to Donald Trump. Everything has to point fingers at Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump has not made an official announcement yet whether he is running for another White House term. And if he runs, the Democrats are running scared. Because they know Joe Biden, the guy that they have in the office right now who can barely stand on his own and yet has still announced that he plans to seek a second term, they know Biden cannot win against Donald Trump if Donald Trump is to run again. Back to CNN politics. So, to do so, the House Select Committee is sketching out its strategy for 2022, including preparing for a series of public hearings intended to address Trump's continued false claims that the election was somehow fraudulent. There the left goes again. They have to tie back to Trump the crazy lunacy of suggesting, discussing, debating, even questioning the idea that there were nefarious goings-on with the election that brought Joe Biden, who campaigned from his basement, into the White House. We're not allowed to ask about that. If we dare question the election results, then we're crazy loons, conspiracy theorists, again, tied to Donald Trump, the lead conspiracy loon, right? One more paragraph from CNN Politics. Envisioned as prime-time broadcasts. Remember that. Some of those hearings would focus on the 2 months between the 2020 election and the January 6th riot, and will likely include testimony from state election officials, as well as former top members of the Trump Justice Department. Prime-time broadcasts. This is the Democrats' playbook going into the midterm elections. They aim, with their partners in the media, to keep this January 6th issue as alive and well and kicking as they possibly can, so as to drum up images of violence and even more violence perpetrated, according to them, solely by conservative Trump lovers on Capitol Hill, by the Trump base. In so doing, they'll be able to draw a link between Trump supporters and violence, at the same time distracting from all that Democrat-fueled, Democrat-supported violence that we've been treated to for years now, under cover of Black Lives Matter and Antifa, thug-style protests in the streets that have been masked by the Democrats as First Amendment freedoms. So the Democrats' playbook, with their partners in the press, is to broadcast these hearings and bring as many images forward as possible that tie conservatives, that tie Republicans, that tie specifically Trump supporters to violence. Why? Here's why. Because Democrats have nothing upon which to campaign. Democrats are in deep, deep doo-doo when it comes to the midterm elections, and when it comes to even the next White House election. Look, President Joe Biden's poll numbers just keep falling. As Newsweek just summarized a couple days ago, an average of Real Clear Politics polling shows in a fictional matchup between Trump and bungling Biden, Trump leads Biden by 4.8 percentage points. About 46% of voters support Trump over Biden. Only 41.2% back Biden in this fictional matchup. And look, Biden has plenty more opportunity to drive his poll numbers down even deeper. Here's a guy whose big political policy agendas are tied to A, coronavirus clampdowns, and B, lecturing Americans about the need to clamp down on freedoms to save the environment of the world. Everything the Democrat Party, everything Joe Biden represents nowadays is all about clamping individual freedoms. And Americans, by God, are getting sick and tired of it, thankfully. Let me read you this recent poll just came out today. Large majorities of Democrats, Republicans, and independents agree America's society and culture is declining. That's the headline. That's the headline of this just released survey from the Convention of States Action and the Trafalgar Group, with the Trafalgar Group being, if you recall, one of the more accurate pollsters in recent elections. Okay, so this survey was conducted December 17th through December 21st, and it included more than 1,000 likely 2022 voters. Okay, that's the group that you want to poll. We don't care so much when we talk about elections, right? We don't care so much about generic Americans' thoughts as we do about those who will actually go to the polls, because those are the people who will have the final say. Anybody can sit at home and scream back at the television screen about how they hate this or hate that, but it's the people who actually go to the polls and who actually cast ballots and who actually vote that offer much more meaningful statistics when it comes to polling. So let's look at some of these numbers. Key insights according to the press release that I received in my email box just this morning. A majority of American voters say countries, society, and culture are declining. Countries meaning possessive. America's society and culture are declining. 76.8% of American voters believe America's society and culture are in a state of decay. Less than 10% of American voters actually believe America's society and culture are in states of progress. Another 13.4% of American voters are unsure. I don't know how you can not have an opinion about that, but still, that is huge. That is a huge divide. 77% of American voters think America's culture and society are falling. Here's another key insight. The majority of Democrats, Republicans, and independents all agree that America's society is in various states of decline. That's huge. More than 81%, almost 82% of independent voters believe America's society, culture are declining. 82% of independents. 61% of Democrat voters think similarly. And fully 86% of Republican voters believe America's society and culture are declining. These are huge numbers, and one of the takeaways from it is when American voters are dissatisfied, they go to the election boxes seeking change. Barack Obama campaigned on this whole platform of hope and change. He never really defined what that hope and change was. He just threw that phrase out there and let the media define what that might be. He let the imaginations of the leftists in America define what that hope and change might be. He didn't really specify that he was a socialist nutcase and that he would drive America farther and farther away from its constitutional roots than practically any other president in modern time. He didn't say all that. That was the result of his twice elections, right? He was the cell phone and pen president. Who needs Congress? I have a cell phone and pen. I can legislate. I am the law. But he didn't have to specify that. He just ran on, I'm different. I'm different. I'm different than the Republicans. I'm different than the conservatives. Meaning, I'm better. So when Americans voted him into office, they were looking for change. They were looking for something different. Well, these numbers here, 82% of independent voters, 61% of Democrat voters, 86% of Republican voters, all believe that America is in a state of decline in terms of its society and culture. That all points to one thing, one conclusion. They seek change. And look, the buck stops with the leadership. Joe Biden, he's out of there. He's out of there come 2024. And guess what, Democrats? You're out of there come 2022, come this November. There's going to be a big change indeed in politics. Let this be the year that we boot socialists from office. And by socialists, I mean just about every Democrat Party candidate who's out there. They've done enough damage. They've had their day. They've had their time. Their time has come to an end. And it's really time for Christian conservatives in America, specifically Christian conservatives. Conservatives, because we need the people with awareness of the constitutional roots of America. Christians, because we need the people who understand that rights come from God, not government. Put those two together, and we need a mass uprising of solid American patriots telling socialists, that is to say Democrats, to get the heck out, that they do not belong in office, that their public service is not wanted. And in the meanwhile, what are Democrats doing? They're trying to distract from the fact that they have nothing to offer America by focusing on things like the January 6th Commission and tying anybody who has questions about the election, about the January 6th Capitol Hill uprisings, about anything to do with the coronavirus and vaccinations. They're trying to tie all that to Donald Trump lunacy. So if you dare question anything in America, if you're a critical thinker anymore in America and simply seeking facts, without the partisanship, just seeking facts, you're automatically put in the camp of Donald Trump violent thugs, deplorables, who have no business having a voice in America's government, culture, or politics. Well, I have with me today a guest who can give some firsthand insight into the January 6th Commission. Kash Patel, he served in the Trump administration, former chief of staff to then acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller. And he's actually been called in to meet with the House Committee and went to meet with the House Committee and can give some firsthand insights into not only the tone and tenor of what these members are saying behind closed doors, but also, given his lengthy political experience, opine about the Joe Biden administration in general and give some insights, firsthand insights, into what is going on in Afghanistan. Remember Afghanistan? Oh yeah, that's the place where this Joe Biden administration abandoned American citizens and allies to fend for themselves, and the mainstream media curiously seems to have forgotten about all that and moved on. Well, Kash has some opinions on that, I'm sure. So, Kash Patel, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
No, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So you have been going back and forth for some time now, I think since September, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but meeting with the January 6th committee and so forth. And I'm just curious, what's your response to what's going on? What's your analysis to what this committee is doing?
Look, I mean, as the guy who was the lead investigator for Russiagate when Devin Nunes was the chairman, I firmly believe in congressional constitutional oversight. It's an important role when it's applied correctly. I just don't think that this commission is in search of what happened on January 6th. It's being politically motivated. And when they subpoenaed me, they didn't bother to reach out to me. They let the media know that I was being subpoenaed, and that's how I found out I was even on their radar. It's kind of not how you run any investigation of credence and credibility.
Yeah, so, they didn't invite you, right?
I've always said I'm happy to go in and talk to them and tell them the truth if that's what they're interested in. I went in, I think, a week or so ago, and they were less interested in January 6th and more interested about everything else.
So what is their ultimate end game here? Is it just to make sure that Donald Trump never resurfaces in the political world again?
I mean, maybe. Look who's on there. Adam Schiff and Swalwell, the guys that perpetuated the biggest political lie and scandal in U.S. history in Russiagate. Those are the two, big mouthpieces on the committee. And what they want to do is exact revenge on people like me. And they know when you issue a subpoena, it costs you $100,000 to $200,000 in legal fees just to entertain it and deal with it.
Wow. So when you meet with them, what's their attitude? What is their demeanor toward you? Is it polite, courteous, or is it hostile, antagonistic?
I mean, it comes and goes, depending on what they want to talk about. And, I asked them to make my transcript public. So so that I have nothing to hide, and they still, they said they'll review it, and in due course, which usually means forever from now. And while they line up all these other people that like me, have nothing to hide, and I told them, I said, you want to talk about January 6th? The one thing I can publicly say is the DoD Inspector General under Joe Biden cleared the Defense Department's action on January 6th and said we did not act with delay, we acted appropriately and swiftly in relation to the National Guard deployment. So Biden's own Inspector General validated our conduct and our action.
Yeah, that just goes toward those who think this is political hype, and that's it. So let's talk about Lloyd Austin for a second and Afghanistan, but specifically Lloyd Austin. It's curious to me that here's a guy who needed a waiver, right, in order to be nominated. And because he'd only been in retirement for 2 years, and the requirement is for 7 years. Who else do you think that the Joe Biden administration could have considered better than Lloyd Austin?
Well, if you ask me, almost anyone.
Yeah.
Based on his track record from CENTCOM Command on through, and his actions speak for themselves. Look, as a former chief of staff for the Department of Defense, I have some idea of what I'm talking about here. And DoD runs itself and defends America through these things called campaign plans, CAM plans. How are we going to take on Russia, China, Iran, terrorism, all that stuff that DoD should be focused on? Secretary Austin's first campaign plan during the Biden administration, which was released a month or two ago, was focused on climate, the weather, literally. That's what our DoD is focused on. That, and of course, Mark Milley's white rage and white supremacy, phantom manhunt.
Wow.
So this hurts our country more than anything else because the priorities set by the top two political appointees are being the most political, and they're supposed to be the least by law because they're leading our military, and it's just hurting our nation.
It was John Kerry who said years ago that he saw climate change as the greatest military threat facing our nation. And here we are carrying these plans out, right? It's this agenda that's being pushed through our national defense.
Well, yeah, and this is why Afghanistan was so catastrophic. We had a conditions-based withdrawal that we ran under President Trump that was working. And when Biden came in, he just told the Taliban and everyone else that basically to forget you, and then you saw what happened. And then in the middle of all this, you have Mark Milley's of the world who have time for book interviews to glorify their own ego instead of when they should have been focused on how do we get our country out of Afghanistan successfully. And we lost 13 service members because they cared more about their egos than the mission that they signed up to serve. And climate change, CAM plan, and everything else is just another example of they're looking to politicize the national security apparatus, and they just don't care about the consequences.
When Afghanistan first happened, when the Joe Biden team first bungled that so badly, that withdrawal, I had some optimism because even the mainstream media, even the leftist media, was reporting it through more truthful eyes, criticizing this administration. But Afghanistan seems to be forgotten now.
Can you believe that? 20 years of blood and treasure. I served with so many people who served there. I was on the ground there a number of times myself. And now it's just like an afterthought. And I'm glad we're still talking about it because it's not over.
No.
There's still 1,000 Americans stuck in Afghanistan, where private companies have engaged, thankfully, and people I used to serve with to try to get people out because our government, left them there. That's just one of the problems. The equipment we left behind is another problem. Russia and China taking that equipment and they're going to exploit it and use it against us, America. That is unheard of. But of course, the media doesn't want to talk about it because it was a cataclysmic failure on the Biden administration. Their evacuation plan left Afghans falling to their death from our C-17s and left our service members being bombed because Joe Biden gave up Bagram and let the terrorist bomber out of Bagram that we had detained because he wanted to surpass a media narrative of Biden knows best and Trump knew nothing when it came to Afghanistan. And the facts speak for themselves, and that's why the media doesn't want to report it because it's not good for them.
Now, who do you know over there on the ground, and what are they telling you about the conditions? I'm sure it's horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's always been tough. It's Afghanistan, but it's horrible when their government has imploded. The Taliban has resurged to power. The individuals that around Afghanistan because they believe in the mission, and it's not good. And normally you'd at least have the U.S. government and the U.S. embassy and the U.S. military there to rely on. They have none of that now. And it's almost as if they've been forgotten, and I think that is about as treasonous of an action that you can have as a government, to forget your citizenry in a war-torn nation and leave them behind. And as Jen Psaki said, well, we sent them an email and a text message, and we heard from some people. That is so outrageously offensive that the White House would posit that from the greatest podium in media and leave it there. It's just infuriating.
Yeah, it's a real let them eat cake moment. Honestly, that's the imagery that comes to mind. Look, where do you see this ending? Where do you see Afghanistan at the end of Joe Biden's administration being handed off to the next administration, which, God help us, better be a Republican. But where do you see this leading?
And I hate to say it, but I see it leading to us having soldiers, us America, back in Afghanistan inside of a year and a half or so.
Yep.
And that's the opposite of what we wanted, what we needed. But right now, like you said, while they've forgotten to talk about Afghanistan, they're not going to forget when terrorism and Al-Qaeda and ISIS established strongholds there and started attacking America and American interests around the world.
Now, I read with interest, there was a recent interview that one of the Taliban leaders gave with the Associated Press, and this particular person was talking about how the Taliban simply wants to do what's right nowadays. They're not like the old Taliban. They recognize women's rights and civil rights, and they actually want to have political relations globally and with America. How do you respond to that?
Look, their actions speak better than their headlines. And we had them at the negotiating table under President Trump because we told them under President Trump that if you hurt a single American interest, we will bring the full force of the U.S. military down on you. And that's what brought them to the negotiating table. We also made them repudiate Al-Qaeda. And we didn't have their leadership stocked with former guys that President Obama let out of Guantanamo Bay. That's the stark contrast between what we did and what they're doing now. So, if they say they want to come to the table and negotiate, I think it's just hyperbole, because they know for the first time in history, the Taliban, are dictating to an American commander-in-chief what they will and will not do. And that shows, to me, from a diplomatic and military standpoint, that we have let them defeat us when it comes to Afghanistan.
And not just Afghanistan, not just the Taliban, but look at China, Russia. They must be giggling in glee at this weak president we have in America right now. Which country do you see as the biggest threat to America at this moment, China or Russia?
It's mostly China, followed by not too distant second Russia, and in some categories, Russia eclipses China in certain areas, but China's our biggest overall threat. I mean, look, these guys are taking target practice at dummy American ships with American insignia.
Yes.
Not doing anything. I mean, it didn't happen under President Trump, but now they're basically saying that. And, of course, you have the Chinese adoption of the NFL and the NBA, so they don't care about the genocide in China because they're allowed to make money off of it. And as long as they go over there and kiss the ring and ignore the interests of the Taiwanese people and the Tibetan movement and the Uyghur genocide, the NFL and the NBA don't care. LeBron James doesn't care. All he cares about is making money, apparently, because they're willing to take all these social stands in America, but when it comes to China and genocide and mass murder, they don't care.
Yeah, and China gives the added threat of the cultural takeover in America. Like you already mentioned, the NBA, and there's also the Hollywood, the movies, and things like that. How much do you see that as as even the bigger threat to China's military or China's something else economy?
Yeah, look, they're making more and more and more money, and they're spreading more and more propaganda that's harmful to the United States. And America's biggest titans of sports in the NFL and the NBA are letting them do that. And I can't believe that that's where we are in this day and age, because the media won't call them out for it, and we're letting these people make money off the backs of genocide and mass breeding camps and forced labor and modern-day slavery. And all of a sudden, that's okay because it's in China and Nike's making a buck. And the NFL, they've only ever cared about making money. There's a few individuals like Enos Kanter who stood up for it. But, I was shocked to see that not many more followed suit.
You know, what I really respected about President Donald Trump is not only did he talk tough, but he set the world sort of on notice in terms of you didn't really know where he stood, how far he would go, what he would do. And that created a sense of safety for America and America's allies, because those nations hostile to us didn't know how far they could push him. Joe Biden and Democrats never seem to get the idea of tough talk and standing strong. What is it with Democrats and all diplomacy all the time?
Well, I could just speak to, being the guy that ran counterterrorism for President Trump and then being the principal deputy over in the intelligence community under Rick Grinnell and over at Chief of Staff. I kind of have a robust background in national security. And here's what they did. It's tragic, but here's what they did. The Biden administration said, what did President Trump do? What did he do in China, Iran, terrorism, hostages, whatever, what have you, Afghanistan? He did X. Okay, we're doing Y. That's their national security strategy. They will not repeat any of President Trump's successes because they refuse to do that. And that just hurts the American people. And all that is letting a political and media narrative take supremacy over American national security interests. And we told them when that we transitioned with them, we said, you can call these plans whatever you want. The Biden plan, America's plan. But some of this is working, and we hope that you use the intelligence to drive your decisions and not the media. And unfortunately, they failed the American people on that front.
Do you think Democrats even like America?
I can't speak for Democrats. I'm a Republican, and I'm not changing. I'm a national security guy first, and I'm happy to have these conversations. But I don't know where some of the sort of staunch national security Democrats have gone to in this last year.
Yeah, honestly, I think Democrats are nuts, and they really are trying to bring America to its knees, to be honest. This isn't the same party as JFK or even Bill Clinton days.
No.
It's completely...
Totally different, and I think, if I could talk for a second about Fight with Cash, the reason I started fightwithcash.com with a K is because of the media. One of the biggest problems we're facing, not just in national security, but it's the media's false reporting about President Trump's successes and Joe Biden's failures. They're not even accurately reporting that. So we started fightwithcash.com because too many people have been defamed, and I'm going around raising money and awareness. And if you've been defamed, you can message us, and we'll pay for your lawsuit. Because we know so many Americans have been hurt. Their names and families have been destroyed by fake news, assaults, and they've been deplatformed, and we just can't let that stand. So we're gonna help you get to court, and anything that anyone can do to help at fightwithcash.com with a K is greatly appreciated.
That sounds like a very crucial, necessary website these days. www.cashwithak.com. That's where people can go?
It's just fightwithcash.com.
Okay.
Fightwithcash.com with a K. That's it.
All right.
You'll see it, and all our content's there. We'll put up these interviews, and there's lots of cool media things, and it's all free.
Well, I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for your fight on behalf of America. It's great to have you on the side of the Constitution. Thank you, Kash.
Thanks so much for having me.
Take Back America has become such an overused phrase. Everybody wants to take back America. Democrats want to take back America. Joe Biden wants to take back America. The socialists want to take back America, which is sort of a strange phrase for socialists to embrace because they never had America in the first place. But seriously, let's take back America. And by that, I mean Christian conservatives. Take back America. The roots of America are on our side. America was founded on principles of individual freedoms coming from God, not government. So any socialist, any Democrat that takes the oath of office and pledges to protect the Constitution, they're automatically breaking that pledge, breaking that oath. They do not belong in office. If what they're pushing is socialism, Marxism, collectivism, globalism, it's against the founding of America. America was founded, first and foremost, by those who sought religious freedoms. Check the true history of America. The left, the secularists, the atheists, the collectivists, the socialists hate that about America. And they're doing everything to drum that fact out of history. But we know better, don't we? We do know better because America is starting to push back against this far left lunacy that has taken over, that has clamped our freedoms, and that has put as priority investigations into Donald Trump supporters over the safety, security, and constitutional well-being of American citizens. So, 2022, it's the year Christian conservatives take back America. If you like Bold and Blunt, please subscribe. Subscribe anywhere that podcasts are offered. But you can go to WashingtonTimes.com and subscribe to Bold and Blunt there. Or you can go to edify.app/podcasts, which is the platform for Christian-based podcasts, and subscribe there. Either way you do it, I'd be happy to have you subscribe. I'd be happy to have your support in 2022 because we need boldness and bluntness if we want to beat back the left this year. Take it from somebody who knows. The left is pretty bold and blunt in attacking those who resist the leftist push to crumble America. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time. And in the meanwhile, once again, stay blunt, stay bold.